the church, there are no churches in Gaza, so I'm not quite sure where the
Well,
report is talking
there's a
about.
Catholic church in there, isn't there? That is
Yeah,
in the
unfortunately, there are no Christians because they were driven out
well,
by
there are.
Hamas.
Recently, Israeli Channel 13 reporter Yossi Eli went undercover as a priest for a day. Dressed in a robe, he walked through the old city with Franciscan Father Alberto. In the first 5 minutes, he was spat at 5 times by Orthodox Jewish Israelis.
I happen to be a follower of Eris, and if you wish to convert this man, you will have to go through me to... Then I object to you calling her...
An elderly lady who was leaving the church to go to the toilet was shot dead. And then her daughter, who went out to try and assist her, was killed as well.
Sì, è la guerra, è il terrorismo.
To destroy crosses and plates of the gravestones here.
This year, Christmas celebrations are cancelled in Bethlehem, and for obvious reasons. It's impossible to celebrate while our people in Gaza are going through a genocide, when children are being massacred in such a brutal manner. While the world is celebrating, our families are displaced and their homes are destroyed. So this is Christmas to us in Palestine.
This is the real war on Christmas. Not just on the celebrations, not just on the Christians, but on the very concept of Christmas itself. And it's happening with the support of Christian Zionists, the very same ones who complain about being persecuted by phrases that are over 100 years old and inclusive to everyone, like Happy Holidays. They support the real, violent persecution of Christians living in the birthplace of Christ on that holy day. And I'm going to show you how.
Yeah, the image basically came from what we see on our screens, children being pulled out of the rubble, and people coming and searching under the rubble to find any sign of life, any sign of hope. These images have broken us, and we wanted to bring them to the church. And usually, a typical manger would have baby Jesus in the middle, and then the Holy Family, the shepherds and the magi surrounding him. But this time around, we thought of all these characters in the in the gospel narrative, in the Christmas narrative, being around the house as if they are searching for Jesus, as if they are trying to find him in the midst of the rubble with dust all over them. Again, we want to bring the Christmas story, make it real in our context today. And I think if Jesus is to be born today, he would be born under the rubble in Gaza with those who are suffering. And the Magi's and the shepherds would come and search for Jesus in the midst of the rubble of a destroyed house, as we see today.
Bethlehem hosts one of the most important Christmas celebrations worldwide. Every year, the city is lit up with thousands of lamps and decorated with one of the biggest Christmas trees in the Holy Land.
Christmas trees, celebrations, nativity scenes. Even the Christmas market hasn't escaped the war. Normally bustling and full of holiday cheer. This year, streets are empty, leaving local workers unable to afford their Christmas, and business owners unable to keep their staff. The Scrooge state's tight fist ensures layoffs are the only things people get for Christmas.
You know, Bethlehem during Christmas was beautiful. People from all over the world used to come. People were waiting for this moment. And as you can see now, it is a ghost town. This is my great-grandfather.
Joey Canavati's family has owned the Alexander Hotel for generations. And here in Bethlehem, the holiday season is the busy season.
We were fully booked October, November, December. We were 120% capacity. We were looking different hotels to send the people because there's no room. There was no room in the inn in Bethlehem.
The Israeli Tourism Ministry estimates 120,000 people visited during the week of Christmas last year.
We had at least 120 people having dinner here every night.
Cavenati hoped they could see even more people this year.
But now all what we get on the email is cancellation after cancellation after cancellation. So it is a catastrophe.
One hotel manager tells the Associated Press nearly 70 hotels are now closed across Bethlehem, leaving 6,000 workers out of a job this holiday season.
And a lot of your carvings are, for obvious reasons, of the nativity scene.
Nativity scene, because this is what represents Bethlehem.
Our Richard Engel spoke with Richard Tabish, whose family has run this nativity shop since 1942. He says the 8 to 10 busloads of tourists and customers he used to get each day are gone.
And when was the last time you had a single customer?
Well, it was on the 6th of October, just the day before the war. Then from the 7th up to today, it's zero business.
What about all your staff, all the people who work here with you, the people who carve all these objects, the people who sell them?
I know. You know, Bethlehem relies 80% on tourism. In my store, we have with us around 30 employees that we work in the store, and we buy our merchandise from more than 100 to 150 merchants that do most of the carvings. They are all locals and do all these beautiful carvings in Bethlehem, and it all stopped.
Palestinian woodcarvers have been working at this family-run business in Bethlehem for almost 150 years. But this Christmas, the war on Gaza and subsequent increase of Israeli military raids across the occupied West Bank has forced tourists to stay away. Hussein Hamash has been carving Christian figurines like this one for more than 3 decades. He depends on his job for his family of 6.
This work is in my blood. I love it, and I love my workplace and my fellow workers. The situation is terrible everywhere. The boss is trying to help us to work by any means, but it's hard for him when business is so bad.
Ramzi Zakaria is the 4th generation to run the business. Pictures of his great-grandfather carving wood hang on the wall.
The situation in Bethlehem is hard because 80% of the economy here depends on tourism. We're trying to keep the workshop running for the workers because they all have responsibilities, and this is all they know. Tourists won't come here as long as the war goes on. It's terribly hard and sad.
Souvenir shops surrounding the ancient square are either shuttered up or struggling to remain open.
This is the worst year it's ever been. Even during bad times, we used to work and there were few tourists. Now, many shops don't even bother opening.
For Hussein, his fellow woodcarvers and thousands of other Palestinians who depend on the festive season for their livelihoods, there will be no Christmas this year.
Some restaurants forced to change their operations.
Nowadays, we are working around 10%, 15% maximum, yes.
Catering to local families instead of tourists. But in a city where people from many religions and denominations have lived and prayed side by side for hundreds of years.
We are praying for peace, you know. Bethlehem is the city where peace was born. So it should be the messenger for peace to be spread all over the world.
Sellers like Hadar Hussein agree with the somber moment, but say it's a bit too much not to have even a Christmas tree.
I'm a Muslim, but I don't think this is the correct decision not to set the tree this year. This is a tradition. For centuries we have been doing it. It's a symbol that unites us. I agree it shouldn't be lit, but the tree should be there.
Although the war is in Gaza, the people living in the birthplace of Christ can't even celebrate Christmas in the safety of their own homes or places of worship, with constant raids across the West Bank and settler attacks in the West Bank and Jerusalem as they try to open up a second front in the war. Their family members are increasingly likely to be kidnapped without even being accused of a crime.
Detaining family members in order to get people to hand themselves over to the Israeli forces. So when they go to a house or to a city and they don't find someone, they arrest their relatives and then pressuring them to hand themselves in. This is the case that we're seeing across the occupied West Bank, and those raids have also happened here where I am in Bethlehem.
The major churches that pilgrims visit, such as the Church of the Nativity, where Christ was born, and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the most important pilgrimage site in Christianity, which holds that the sites believed to be the site of Christ's crucifixion as well as resurrection, are contained within. These have all been subject to heavy and arbitrary restrictions.
And Palestinian business owners here say they have seen nothing like this ever before. This is what tourists are afraid of. Israel has launched military raids across the occupied West Bank, including on Bethlehem, almost every night since the war on Gaza started. Israel says it's targeting suspected members of the Palestinian armed resistance groups, but the Israeli army has destroyed what's estimated to be hundreds of millions of dollars worth of private and public property and killed almost 300 Palestinians during the raids.
3 days of travelling through the occupied West Bank, Palestinians have said consistently that since the war in Gaza, Jewish settlers are better armed and much more aggressive. At Susia, south of Hebron.
What they know is what they hear in the press, and
which is what?
Which is wrong. I mean,
no, but what do they hear in the press?
Settlers from Susia throw stones on Arabs. Susia people cut olive trees, but it's not true. I mean, sometimes it is.
Soldiers checked us out. One told an Israeli colleague that he was a traitor for visiting Palestinians. They filmed us, but took much less interest in what had happened a few miles down the road. The village of Kirbit Zanuta had been bulldozed, activists said last night. Zanuta's 200 Palestinians left 4 weeks ago after a barrage of threats from armed Jewish settlers. The school was destroyed. Britain helped fund it. The project was called Supporting Palestinians at Risk of Forcible Transfer. Activists said settlers did it to make sure the Palestinians would never come back. Someone drew Jewish Stars of David.
Sorry, forgive me.
A settler leader cancelled an interview. The police said they were waiting for a complaint. In fact, Zanuta's Palestinians have petitioned Israel's Supreme Court. We went to the village with a former Israeli Special Forces soldier who now campaigns against the occupation.
They are demolishing Palestinian villages, beating up Palestinian farmers, stealing their olives. They are trying to open a third front, an east front, against the Palestinians. Why? The Palestinian West Bank. Why? Because they want this without any Palestinians. They want the land without Palestinians.
Palestinians see all this and the rest of the settler violence on the West Bank as confirmation of their worst fears, that there are powerful elements inside Israel, in the government as well as the settler movement, who want them out and who are using the enormous crisis surrounding the Gaza war as an opportunity to further their agenda.
Donc ils sont venus tranquilles avec leur bulldozer ici et commencent à démolir le mur. 5 heures du matin, donc il n'y a personne. On fait une ligne, une chaîne humaine. Physiquement, on arrête les bulldozers. Et après les attaques des colons armés et des chiens, on est allé mettre la barricade pour nous protéger, pour protéger nos propriétés. Les gens, ils travaillent, les gens ne peuvent pas passer tous les jours ici, toutes les heures ici. Donc on voulait arrêter les bulldozers avant qu'ils arrivent au mur, avant qu'ils fassent des dégâts. Mais avec l'arrivée de ce gouvernement d'extrême droite, ça devient de plus en plus compliqué. Maintenant, c'est plus nos voisins du quartier juif. Eux, ils ne causent pas de problème. C'est des colons qui viennent d'en dehors de Jérusalem et qui ont la carte blanche, qui font face à une impunité totale et qui ont un seul but, c'est la judaïsation complète de la vieille ville de Jérusalem et des terres saintes. We are staying here on our land. If they have a claim, if they have a contract, if they have anything, let them go to court and we will happily fight them in court. But I think we've proven to them that we are ready to make sacrifices.
Continuo a ricevere da Gaza notizie molto gravi e dolorose. Civili inermi sono oggetto di bombardamenti e spari. E questo è avvenuto persino all'interno del complesso parrocchiale della Santa Famiglia, dove non ci sono terroristi, ma famiglie, bambini, persone malate con disabilità, suore. una mamma e sua figlia, la signora Navda Khalil Anton e la figlia Samar Qamar Anton, sono state uccise e altre persone ferite dai tiratori scelti mentre andavano in bagno. È stata danneggiata la casa delle suore di Madre Teresa, colpito il loro generatore. Qualcuno dice è il terrorismo, è la guerra. Sì, è la guerra, è il terrorismo. Per questo la scrittura afferma che Dio fa cessare le guerre, rompe gli archi e spezza le lance. Preghiamo il Signore per la pace.
That the compound around the Church of the Holy Family was attacked. Some of its crucial infrastructure was targeted with rockets. And I think most distressing of all, an elderly lady who was leaving the church to go to the toilet was shot dead. And then her daughter, who went out to try and assist her, was killed as well. All of this within what has been clearly designated as a church place, which I cannot believe for 1 minute has rocket launchers in it. And it's a community that since October has sheltered hundreds of people and looked after them. And the religious sisters, the nuns there, have been cooking and feeding people. And the house where they live in that compound, where they look after 54 very handicapped people, the water tanks were blown off, the solar panels were blown off, and the house was rendered almost uninhabitable. So it's a desperate situation for them. It is interesting that the parish is dedicated to the Holy Family, Jesus, Mary and Joseph, precisely because when they were fleeing from the threat of being killed, they walked those same streets. So they went to Egypt and they went through Gaza. That was the route. So all those people in Gaza who are fleeing more than once, they're actually in the same footsteps as that Holy Family.
Tense moments during Orthodox Easter weekend in the Old City of Jerusalem, as thousands of Christians who flocked from around the world to this holy site kept out by Israeli police.
Police here in the Christian Quarter are using their bodies to physically keep back the thousands of people trying to enter the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, saying there's simply not enough room.
They say they relied on an engineer's analysis of how many can safely attend.
We're here ultimately to ensure that the people who got the permission from the church leaders are able to attend and attend it safely.
But church officials say it's a fraction of how many attended safely in years past, and part of a growing and alarming pattern.
Our biggest concern has to do with the Israeli occupation forces using violence to impose restrictions on our freedom of worship as Christians.
This is the almost 1,700-year-old Church of the Nativity, built at the birthplace of Jesus. This year, there are no queues of excited foreign faces, and there's virtually no one inside.
At the Church of the Flagellation, Brother Matteo shows me a statue of Jesus ripped down and desecrated in February by an American man wearing Jewish religious garments. Police also confirming 28 tombstones were vandalized at this historic cemetery, calling them acts of hatred.
On the first day of January, two young people, 15 and 18-year-old, came, extremist Jewish youth, obviously only to destroy crosses and plates of the gravestones here.
Overlooking the old city, Gadi Gveryahu is here to bear witness. A religious Jew from the group Tag Ma'ir, he pays condolence visits to victims of extremism.
How does it feel as an observant Jew when you see actions like this done in the name of your faith?
I feel horrible, a lot of shame. This is not our faith. It's not written in the Bible. We should all condemn those extremists.
Settlers in Jerusalem enjoy a special level of support from the government, with Deputy Mayor Aria King, yes, the same one that called for the journalists, students, teachers, called those all subhuman, Nazis, and, called for them all to be buried alive.
In early December, City Council member and right-wing settler Yonatan Yosef and the Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem, Aria King, delivered an eviction notice to Fatima. Aryeh King is a central figure in the settler movement. He founded the Israel Land Fund, a group that advertises and facilitates property sales exclusively for Jewish residents.
The Israel Land Fund is dedicated to putting the land of Israel back into Jewish hands.
On its website, which has since been updated, you could find investing opportunities for, quote, ideology properties. But instead of Sheikh Jarrah, it's called the Hebrew Nakalat Shimon. In one listing, it said plots were being squatted on by Arabs who have built on them illegally or are renting. In an interview with AJ+, King was unapologetic about the Israel Land Fund's mission.
היחידים שיש להם בנפיט זה העם היהודי. המטרה של הקרן אדמות ישראל כשהוקמה היא שיהיה כמה שיותר אדמה בארץ ישראל, בבעלות כמה שיותר יהודים, וזו המטרה.
From 2011 to 2017, almost all of its donations were from the Central Fund of Israel, a New York-based nonprofit. And the Israel Land Fund's director is this man, Ben Packer, a nationalist rabbi from Virginia who also runs a youth hostel in Jerusalem that's been called out for its ties to extremism. Just days after the Salem family received its eviction notice, Ben Packer and a group of young Americans were caught on camera fencing off the land adjacent to the Salem house.
What are you doing? Where are you from? I'm Israeli. Where are you from? Why are you doing this? I work for the contractor. You work with a contractor, huh? Understand what you are doing.
With the tacit support of Israeli police, the Americans and Israeli settlers installed wiring and a fence around the land just outside the family's home. Soon, a key player in the settler movement shows up to the site. It's Aryeh King.
תמונות יפות. הישגים גדולים. בונים חניה לעירייה, חניה ליהודים, בואו נתהיה שמונה ליהודים. ברוך השם.
זה בחלום שלך, זה שאתה חולם.
כל החלומות שלי עד היום מתגשמים.
Inside the King of Kings congregation, some 800 people recently attended 2 concerts of Hebrew worship songs.
It was a night of worship and singing through the scriptures, singing through the Psalms. Everyone was invited, and we were very upfront about what this event was. That was important to us, that all of the people attending knew exactly what they were coming to through the purchase of tickets well before the event.
But outside, something else was going on.
So as the worshipers were trying to come in, the protesters would block them. They would get in their way. They would physically put their hands on them, put their body on them.
Senior pastor Chad Holland told CBN News protesters verbally and physically attacked those trying to attend the concert sponsored by the Messianic Jewish Alliance of Israel.
Several people that got harmed, they got accosted. We were being told of several people who got hurt. In addition to that, there was quite a loud noise-making group, and eventually this group of protesters, and we might even say violent protesters, grew to between 80 and 100 people.
While Holland commended police for bringing order, he felt more could have been done to prevent the situation.
We want to say thank you to the police. They did such a good job. They were so brave and courageous. All we would want is for the police to take it more seriously early on, to send more police early so we could avoid this whole event altogether.
One of Jerusalem's deputy mayors, Aryeh King, stood behind and supported the protesters, which included many teenagers and young men. Others cheered them on from above. Holland emphasized that there was no intent to evangelize. He says what happened exposed people's hearts.
Worshippers were coming for one heart of love for God, love for one another, and the protesters had a different heart motive, and they didn't seem to care if someone was a man, a woman, a grown person, a child, an elderly person, or a baby. They didn't seem to care. They were going to promote this violence, make this noise.
So notice Americans are helping the settlers, and don't worry, we'll get back to that. But first, let's look at Jerusalem's supposedly more moderate deputy mayor.
We understand that a teenager has been shot. Is this the right way to handle this situation, given that tensions are already rising and emotions are already quite high?
Well, we're talking about the release of attempted murderers. You call them children, but we're talking about teenagers who stabbed other teenagers. We're talking about...
That's not my question, Deputy Mayor. I totally and fully understand that they have been accused.
I'm giving you the context.
I understand, but if I can, Deputy Mayor, I'm just going to interrupt you. I'm fully aware. I'm fully aware of.
I'm answering the
Deputy
question.
Mayor, I'm fully aware of what they've been.
Celebrations. Part of the deal was that there would be no celebrations. And the reason that these clashes are occurring is because exactly against the deal that there would be no celebrations celebrating the release of attempted murderers in East Jerusalem, in my city, where many people, many of the victims live side by side with the people who try to kill them. Part of the deal was that they would not have these celebrations. And if the clashes are occurring, it's exactly because of that. And we're also hearing the chants of the people.
Deputy Mayor, I'm just going to interrupt you because absolutely, and I've been speaking to Israeli officials who have laid out some of the crimes that these people have been accused of. As you say, they've been accused of all sorts of, crimes against various different individuals, and that's why they are in the prison. That's not the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is that they have now been released as part of this deal, and yet our camera crews, our teams on the ground who were in East Jerusalem, for example, were not allowed to enter the homes of some of these people who have been released, some of these prisoners, including yesterday when they tried to interview a 17-year-old boy who was taken away for throwing stones.
Part of the deal, as I repeated, and I said earlier, and I will repeat again, was that this wouldn't be a celebration because the release of attempted murders, and when we're talking about a stone, we're talking about boulders that open people's heads. So let's put things in their place. And so part of the deal was that there wouldn't be fanfare around the release of attempted murderers, especially near the towns of the people that they tried to murder. And so if the police are preventing that, it's because it was part of the deal.
You notice she tries to paint all Palestinian hostages as attempted murderers. Stone throwing becomes boulder throwing, as if that were even possible for minors to be throwing boulders, all to justify treating them as less human than Israelis, justifying shooting them for having the natural human reaction, while claiming to be fair.
About what Hamas is doing. Let me repeat. I'm not asking you whether it's tragic. Let me just. This is how an interview works, Fleur. Let me pose the question to you, please. Do you condemn the Israeli military's killing of 7 children of the al-Bakri family? I'm not asking you if you think it's tragic. I'm not asking you how you feel about Hamas's attacks. We have condemned. And I've given very hard interviews on October the 8th to Hamas officials, but I'm asking you to answer the question. Do you condemn the killing of 7 children, yes or no?
I think it's tragic that 7 children died today. It doesn't matter who they are, whether they're Palestinian or Israeli.
So
yes.
Viewers will notice, Fleur, that you are not condemning the Israeli military's killing of 7 children. How would you respond to those who say, well, let me finish the question, Fleur. Let me finish the question. How would you? No, I haven't finished the question. Please, this is how a conversation works.
In my last video, I went in depth into exactly this sort of rhetoric, where you can shoot children intentionally and justify it by characterizing it as a tragedy and not a crime. I examined where it comes from, how it's used, and how it might be used in the future. Long story short, it came from the US and Korea and the Vietnam Wars. It's being used like this, and in the future we can expect to see even more responsibility being shifted onto the civilians who are being murdered.
How would you respond to those who will say that by failing to condemn what international... Let me read to you a statement by Amnesty International concerning the killings of children. It says on October the 19th, it's saying, okay, we'll come to whether they're neutral or not,
They're saying, quote, they're concerned about violations of international humanitarian law by Israeli forces in Gaza. They go on to reference airstrikes, pounding residential buildings, killing children. They are blaming Israeli forces, not Hamas, not Human Shields, for killing Israeli children, Palestinian children. By not recognizing that, how do you respond to those who say you're not giving the same value to Palestinian babies and children as you are to Israelis?
That's not true. And let me tell you what the difference is. When you're condemning means that somebody went and purposefully did something.
Despite all of this, of course innocent civilians were killed. Every war is chaotic and confusing, and mistakes are frequent. But mistakes are not war crimes. Hamas, on the other hand, committed war crimes as official government policy.
This right here is exactly how it works. He went to painstaking efforts to clarify that Israel was being accused of intentionally killing children, not as collateral damage, not as human shields, but it doesn't matter. All you have to do is repeat the mantra. It's not intentional. Accidents aren't war crimes. Collateral damage isn't a war crime. Really, this is just a more sophisticated version of, when two toddlers get in a fight and, one is convinced that they're in the right, because even though, they threw the first punch, they didn't mean it. Oh, but the other kid, you hit hard. You meant it. The
Israeli army does not purposely go to kill children. Unfortunately, children and adults and all people can be the casualties of war. There's a difference between being a casualty of war, which is tragic, and going and purposefully targeting children. And that I would condemn whoever did that.
So what you're then telling viewers, Fleur, is you've dismissed Amnesty as not neutral.
Yes, I've dismissed Amnesty
let me finish,
International.
please, Fleur. I didn't interrupt you. I didn't interrupt you, Fleur. You must let me ask the question, please. So what you're saying to viewers is that what B'Tselem, an Israeli human rights organization, says when it talks about a criminal policy of revenge is underway in its October the 10th statement, by giving an order to prefer, quote, to prefer damage over precision has been carried out, and saying this constitutes, quote, war crimes openly ordered by top Israeli officials. Are you saying also B'Tselem are wrong and they don't know how to assess the situation?
Categorically, they're wrong, because we warn people. We warn the people of northern Gaza to move to southern Gaza specifically and precisely because we know that the Hamas infrastructure, there's a whole city underground full of weapons, full of rocket launchers. And because we didn't want innocent civilians in harm's way, we asked them to move out of the way. So yes, I condemn Amnesty International, which everybody knows is biased and corrupt to its core, and B'Tselem, who've lost their marbles.
Okay, we'll leave the viewers to judge that. I'm wondering, do you also then condemn as biased and lost their marbles 48 UN experts who say, quote, in a statement, we strongly condemn Israel's indiscriminate military attacks against the already exhausted Palestinian people of Gaza. There is no justification for violence that indiscriminately targets innocent civilians, whether by Hamas or Israeli forces. This is absolutely prohibited under international law and amounts to a war crime. Are you telling viewers Amnesty is wrong, B'Tselem has lost its marbles, and the 48 UN experts are also biased and wrong?
Well, all you have to do is look at the UN schools in Gaza and the West Bank to know
Fleur,
that
you're not answering the question.
Curriculum,
You're not answering the question, Fleur. You're not answering the question. Please answer the question.
You're not letting me answer. You're not letting me answer the question and get to my point. What I'm saying is, how can I hold UN so-called experts to any type of expert opinion when they are managing a curriculum that teaches hatred and how to kill Jews, anti-Semitic, and completely obsessed with the right of return, which is the destruction of Israel? These are the same UN experts.
Used to defeat them, used to kill them. And one thing I saw is that whether you live in the north or the south of Israel, whether you're religious or secular, everyone agreed and united. We can no longer embrace this being Mr. Nice Guy to the people who are in Gaza, because this is over 1,000 years of mothers teaching their children, grow up and kill Jews, grow up and kill Jews. It's the mindset. Can you pause it?
Here's something else we've been hearing from the right a lot lately, that education institutions, along with the UN and all human rights organizations, have all been captured by vicious anti-Semites, Hamas, and Pallywood. Since Israel can't admit to doing anything bad intentionally, the only rationalization is that anyone who criticizes Israel has been lied to and indoctrinated into wanting to kill Jews more than anything else, even more than wanting your children to live.
Would you also say Human Rights Watch is wrong when they said in their statement on October the 9th, Israeli authorities cutting off electricity to Gaza amounts to unlawful collective punishments, which is a war crime? Are they wrong?
Well, first of all, what you have to ask yourself is, why doesn't Hamas have its own electricity grid? Why has it been 21 years since we left Gaza in 2005?
Of course, Flo, you're still not answering the question. Is it a war crime?
Well, why don't Egypt help them out? No,
Flo,
it's not
is it a war crime? It's not a war crime, all right?
No.
So all the good neighbor, all the money, Israel supplies all of the electricity, all of the water in Gaza, everything they've done for them was turned around and used against Israel.
Because Israel is an apartheid state. They don't let Gaza build its own water treatment system or electricity grid. They don't even let them have an airport. They bombed it back in 2001.
What do you make of the United Nations Special Rapporteur, who said, quote, Israel has imposed upon Palestine an apartheid reality in a post-apartheid world? Has he lost his marbles?
Well, let's talk about what apartheid actually is, because I think this word is kind of thrown around willy-nilly, and it actually, I think, insults the South African people.
So the UN doesn't know what apartheid is, Flo?
Apartheid system. Yes, the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank are autonomous to 94% of the people living in the West Bank. In 2005, Israel left the Gaza Strip in the hope that the Palestinians would have an autonomous region that they could build into a state. And
Flo,
instead of building
you're saying to viewers, the UN doesn't know what apartheid is.
They built it into Beirut. They built it. No, apartheid means different rules in the same country. We're not the same country. Gaza is no longer Israeli territory. The West Bank is not Israeli territory. It's under the Palestinian Authority. And the only reason we have security forces around Area A and Area B is to protect ourselves from the terrorist hubs that exist in the autonomous Palestinian Authority territory. That's a fact, and that's the truth.
Of course, this is the exact justification that was given for apartheid in the first place, that the people living in Bantustans weren't citizens of South Africa. They were citizens of their Bantustan. Doesn't help her case either that South Africa considers Israel to be an apartheid state, or that there actually are different laws for Arabs and Jews living in Israel, which is the way that she defines apartheid.
So you're saying the UN doesn't know what apartheid is, Fleur? Perhaps I could read to you what Amnesty International has said.
Not.
Let me finish the question. October the 7th, Amnesty International says that Israel has a horrific track record of committing war crimes. The root causes of these repeated cycles of violence must be addressed. It references the 16-year illegal blockade on Gaza and, quote, all other aspects of Israel's system of apartheid imposed on Palestinians. Do you think that the apartheid, the occupation, the siege
There's no
is
apartheid.
not...
Stop throwing around a word that is inaccurate. Apartheid is a specific word for South
amnesty is
Africa
wrong and
for
inaccurate.
different rules for black and white people. It's not an accurate, it's a lazy term. And you can ask a South African who lived through apartheid whether he thinks what we have here is apartheid. Let me tell you what we have here. 20% of the population of the state of Israel are Arab Israelis. Full citizens. Ask them if they live in an apartheid state. They don't. What we then have is a Palestinian Authority that wanted to be autonomous, that is in charge of 94% of its people, that of course don't govern very well, are extremely corrupt. And then you have Gaza, where we haven't been since 2005, with a genocidal terrorist regime. They could have built Dubai, they built Beirut. That's what happened in Gaza. And it's a shame for the people of Gaza. And they're the pawns, not just of Hamas, they're also the pawns of Iran. And that's the tragedy here.
Now, there's a reason she invokes Beirut and Iran here, the great enemies in the Israeli mind. Between Fleur and Amira, you have your bases covered. You have one that screeches that it isn't intentional. It's not apartheid, and Israel is a multicultural democracy, and, one who just outright says it all belongs to the Jews because the Bible says so while he attacks babies.
Okay, so we're going to end it there. Of course, you still haven't answered the question of whether you're willing to condemn the Israeli strikes that are killing Israeli children, but unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. We'll leave it for viewers. We'll leave it for viewers to decide. Thank you very much, Fleur Hassan Nahum.
Remember the Americans from before?
The work to evict this family continues, and it's happening because people like Chaim Silberstein can use Israel's legal system to forcibly remove Palestinians.
זה מסמך רשמי? לא, אתה יכול לראות אותו? אני מצטער, אני הבאתי לך נסח טאבו. אם אתה מראה לי נסח טאבו, אני מקבל אותו. אבל זה נסח טאבו.
Chaim heads a New Jersey registered charity called Keep Jerusalem. It's played a pivotal role in influencing policy and public opinion on issues of land ownership. At the site, he ignored the videographer who was filming him.
לא נעים כשמגרשים אנשים מהבתים. לא נעים שכולם רואים אותך. רואים אותך, חיים.
Here's how this eviction is happening. Documents revealed here show that Chaim paid roughly $100,000 to buy the land from the descendants of the Jewish family who lived here before the Arab-Israeli War in 1948. And this is key because Jewish residents have a legal process to reclaim land. Palestinians do not. He later transferred the property rights to another man who transferred it again to Yonatan Yosef. Remember, Yonatan is a member of the Israel Land Fund who showed up with Aryeh King to hand deliver Fatima's eviction. Documents reviewed by AJ Plus confirm that Chaim and Aryeh's operations have relied heavily on U.S. charities and American tax-deductible donations. But the original owners aren't moving back in, and as a result of his actions, Palestinian families are forced from their homes. Chaim's charity has received hundreds of thousands of dollars from the US and Canada, and its mission is to secure a Jewish majority in Jerusalem. In presentations available online, Keep Jerusalem says it's petitioned to demolish homes. Back in Sheikh Jarrah, new levels of provocation continue outside the Salem home. This time, a far-right member of the Knesset set up a makeshift office outside the family's home, declaring, quote, "We are the landlords."
Well, there are also Americans involved in trying to ethnically cleanse the Armenian quarter of the oldest Armenian diaspora. One settler seen in Cow's Garden is American citizen with links to settler extremist movements in the West Bank, Satya Herskup. Herskup also has ties to Erdan Natanzadeh, a man who in 2005 killed 4 Israeli citizens in protest against the withdrawal from Gaza. Alongside Herskup, you can see Israeli investor Danny Rothman, the investor behind Zana Gardens, the real estate firm secretly purchasing Cow's Garden. When this secret deal was discovered, public outrage pressured the Armenian Patriarchate into saying they no longer viewed the deal as legal. A few days later, the settlers showed up in force with guns, dogs, and 2 bulldozers. This whole time, Armenian resistance has been nonviolent, while settlers have gone in to do illegal demolitions and intimidation with the support of the police, exactly like the Israeli Ku Klux Klan. This happens in the atmosphere of not just increased hostility of settlers against Christians, but against Armenians specifically, with Israel reinforcing its ties with Azerbaijan as they ethnically cleanse Artsakh, the second oldest Armenian diaspora, while Israel works to cleanse the oldest. The population has declined from 27,000 a century ago to just 1,000 today. Armenians are not allowed to build new homes. It's only a matter of time until all Armenians in Jerusalem are treated like Christians in the Church of the Holy Family.
It started with an encircling of soldiers who were at the gates. The bin collector was coming in just to do his job, was shot. The janitor, the same, came to fix something, passed through the gates, shot. Their bodies were laying there in the street for a number of days. They reported, and it's very contentious, but they say they saw white phosphorus being thrown into the church compound. There was gunfire. Of course, they are terrified. They escape into, they're sleeping on the floors of Sunday school rooms in the complex. And when they emerged, they saw bullet casings everywhere. And so they have been terrified, absolutely terrified. It then escalated further. The generator was blown up. That meant that that was their last store of electricity. It was also the generator that filtered the water, that pumped the water. So they'd been drinking either bottled water or from the well, and that was gone. And then tanks appear. There's a sniper which was operating, and so that stopped them from, again, leaving the classrooms. They were, by the way, my family are in 2 different classrooms. There's one in one. Her husband died tragically a few weeks ago from dehydration. He just needed a hospital. And then the others 4 are together, the parents and 2 11-year-old boys.
And this is all within the complex of the parish?
All within the complex, yeah. And they're with about 300 people. It's a combination of nuns, of people who live there, normally disabled people, and also orphan children. And then, you know, the Christian community in Gaza is very small. Even Palestine is pretty small, but in Gaza it's even smaller. They all know each other. And yeah, they didn't know why this was happening. What the soldiers told them on day 1 was that we want you to evacuate. And they said, no, this is where we are. We're not moving. And I wonder, you know, for all of the protestations that Hamas is operating from there, now, you know, the Pope and other eyewitnesses who are there are very categorical. There is no Hamas. It's also nonsensical. You know, really? Hamas are operating from a convent and the nuns hid them? Really? It just doesn't make sense if you understand how this works. It just doesn't make sense. So the tanks are still there. The number of snipers has increased. It was 1, it's now 4. We know what happened to those poor women who were just trying to go to the toilet and shot. One was twice in the chest, 1 in the head. Then the denial by Israeli spokespeople in the UK, it even happened, and we all felt that we were being completely gaslit.
Most Americans helping settlers are Christians, and financed by Christian Zionists. I don't think I've seen anything as American as these Christian cowboy Zionists playing cowboys and Indians in the West Bank. We want to live for Israel. That is our goal, said 24-year-old Yosef Strain from Montana. High Oval, the organization responsible for bringing these Christians to the West Bank, launched Operation Itai, raising $29 million for security supplies for the West Bank, such as bulletproof vests, helmets, night vision goggles, binoculars, drones, flashlights, and, you know, probably more guns and ammunition. They aren't subtle about what this equipment is for either. Everyone is talking about a proportionate response, Waller added. A proportionate response would be to bring the supplies needed to stop another Jewish massacre from happening. He said Gaza is only one front. Syria and Lebanon are the other 2 fronts, and the West Bank is the 4th front. These Christian Zionists are in good company, and these pro-settler nonprofits enjoy the official support and endorsement of the U.S. government and Joe Brandon administration as 501c3 tax-exempt charitable organizations. He symbolically puts travel restrictions on a few dozen settlers. not even people like these cowboys, while subsidizing settlement directly with millions of taxpayer dollars every year.
Jewish people wouldn't tolerate these sorts of attacks against them. In other countries, they're very vocal about it, and they shouldn't tolerate it here when their own co-religionists carry out similar attacks against Christians.
For Christian Zionists, these sacrifices of even other Christians is necessary to rebuild the temple and bring back Jesus, as if Jesus is some sort of dark lord that must be summoned back into the world with the blood sacrifice of innocence.
It was Fraudrin. The wizards of Danafal who worship the demon race somehow figured out a way to resurrect him. In order to break the goddess race's seal, he needed the blood of a goddess. But by then, the goddess race didn't even exist. Fraudrin tried to resurrect the Ten Commandments by sacrificing all of Danafal's humans as a substitute. Dark clouds surrounded the kingdom, and winged beasts came from the demon realm.
I don't understand. How could this ritual manage to fail after I offered all this human blood? It would appear those human sacrifices weren't for nothing. They allowed me to discover the one I really needed for my purposes.
Honestly, their Jesus might be, considering Jesus himself said that he was the third temple, and that it is finished in regard to our salvation, meaning sacrifices are no longer necessary. Christians normally just symbolically reenact the sacrifice of flesh and blood of Christ through communion. But, of course, most Christian Zionists are extremist fundamentalists who think Israel is the land of the Jews.
Parsons told CBN News the scriptures are clear about how Christians should treat the Jewish people.
Scriptures are clear that Genesis 12:3 says we need to bless the Jewish people. Isaiah says comfort them. Paul in Romans 11 says show them mercy. So we have biblical commands to stand with Israel, support them. We're not going to condition that support on whether or not these attacks are stopping, but it does make it harder for us to build support and friendship for Israel out there.
I will say this.
You speak for yourself.
If you will not stand with Israel and the Jews,
no,
then I will not stand with you. Thank you, and God bless you.
Ironic.
Often when there is dissent expressed in the United States against policies of the Israeli government, people here are called anti-Semitic. What is your response to that as an Israeli Jew?
Well, it's a trick. We always use it. When from Europe somebody is criticizing Israel, then we bring up the Holocaust. When in this country people are criticizing Israel, then they are anti-Semitic. And the organization is strong and has a lot of money, and the ties between Israel and the American Jewish establishment are very strong, and they are strong in this country. As you know, they have power, which it's okay. They are talented people, and they have power, money, and media, and other things. And their attitude is Israel, my country, right or wrong, the identification. And they are not ready to hear criticism. And it's very easy to blame people who criticize certain acts of the Israeli government as anti-Semitics, and to bring up the Holocaust and the suffering of the Jewish people, and that justify everything we do to the Palestinians.
And don't be fooled by the sneaky ones like Joe Brandon either. His ideas when it comes to Israel's claims to the land and the lack of humanity of the Palestinians is in line with Michelle Bachmann or John Hagee.
What are the chances of a Gaza ceasefire? None. No possibility.
So what connects all this together, everybody, is that evil people and evil organizations
they take advantage of our fake God of tolerance.
That's right.
And they say, oh, these people are so stupid because they want to be tolerant, and they come in and they rape our girls and they kill us, and then they go and they kill a bunch of Jews in Israel. Maybe we shouldn't be so tolerant.
Well, and maybe our President Biden should learn what the truth is of what's going on in Gaza versus what's going on in Israel. So can you imagine? He handed a check for $100 million of our money just a couple of weeks after they slit the throats of Israelis. He's not willing to sign $14 billion to help the Israelis. The money is flowing in for Gaza. All the money is coming in from Iran. And that's what the people of Gaza are. They're basically Hyde mercenaries. That is their industry. Terrorism is their industry. That's why you have more miles of tunnels, Charlie, than you have the New York subway, because they have one industry in Gaza, and that's terrorism. So it's time that Gaza ends. The 2 million people who live there, they are clever assassins. They need to be removed from that land. That land needs to be turned into a national park. And since they're the voluntary mercenaries for Iran, they need to be dropped on the doorstep of Iran. Let Iran deal with those people.
Michelle Bachmann, everybody, she does a great job, doesn't she?
Oh my God.
And I gotta be honest,
the genocide,
I
Michelle.
look at Israel, and Israel says, we never want another person into our country that doesn't share our values. They said they don't want refugees, they don't want any of these people.
What a concept.
I want American immigration policy to be like that.
Yes.
I want American immigration policy to be the Israeli immigration. Big walls, lots of deportations, and no people that hate us.
And
Michelle?
lots of happiness.
And lots of joy and shalom
That's right,
and
lots of
peace
joy.
and happiness. If you hate us, get the hell out of it.
And to us, this is a message that Jesus identifies with our suffering. He is in solidarity with those who are oppressed. He is in solidarity with those suffering. So it's a message of comfort and hope to us.
Fate to Israel's enemies. Making threats against Israel is nothing more than a self-fulfilling prophecy about yourself. When you speak of Israel passing away with a sudden storm, you're only speaking of your own demise. Where are the nations that have persecuted the Jewish people? They are historic footnotes in the boneyard of human history. Where is Israel and the Jewish people? Despite the efforts of Iran, Hamas, and Hezbollah to destroy the Jewish nation, Israel lives. Israel lives. Israel lives.
The sickness has been cut out. In the name of Cain. In the name of Cain. In the name of Cain. Cain lives.
Even the more moderate ones, like the Cardinal of Westminster, still act confused as to why Israel is taking actions that don't make its citizens safer, and all while reiterating Israel's right to defend itself from a territory it's illegally occupying.
And what absolutely puzzles me is this does nothing to further Israel's right to defend itself, which I understand.
Israel always presents itself as the bastion of rationality and civilization against fundamentalism.
This war is a war that is not only between Israel and Hamas. It's a war that is intended really, truly, to save Western civilization, to save the values of Western civilization.
But we see that Zionism is a form of fundamentalism, which has become very popular among Christians and Jews, literally believing God gave them the land 2,000 years ago, giving them a right to not tolerate other races or religions.
Those religious extremist Jews, they don't want us, basically. They tell us every time, we don't want you, get out of Israel. and we don't want to. This is our land. We don't have any problem. They have problem. Not only with Armenians, all other religious, non-Jewish like Muslims, Christians, Assyrians. Started with our two friends. Sorry. They pepper sprayed our friends, and then we knew about that. We went to the front of the convent to see what's going on, and a few provocations happened also. And then we started to chase them, and then from the police station they came out, other soldiers. They didn't know what's going on, and they tried to, stop between the two groups that they are fighting. And then everything happened there. We start to back off to our convent. They start to hit and push us.
Israel attacks moderate religious institutions and accuses them of being the fundamentalists. So this Christmas, I ask that you think of the people living in the birthplace of Jesus, who aren't allowed to celebrate that birth, who are facing the same persecution as he did at the hands of a despot, and who are trying to flee along the same roads that he did. Remember his words. Whatever you did for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. All right. I love you. Peace on earth and goodwill to all men. Merry Christmas.